is a tremendous honor and a zchut, a great honor and a privilege to meet you, Mordechai. This is Mordechai Perlov, and Mordechai has written a book called Once Were Slaves, and it's appeared articles, and we're going to be discussing it more, A Will to Survive in Jewish Life. And it really is wonderful to see you and to meet somebody who has gone through so much in their life. And we look forward to just hearing a bit about your life.
Well, the same applies to me. For 70 years, I never told my children what happened to me, and only 5 years ago did I agree to record it in my book.
So,
and
your children, did they know a little bit?
No.
You kept it quiet?
They only know what you will know after tonight. And now I can't stop talking. First time I talked is 3 years ago at Limud. Was persuaded to talk, and I have a man who interviews me, and we're very successful, and we are in demand.
And Mordechai, can I just ask, before we even start, and before our listeners out there are going to be watching this, you're a very young, how old are you? Or how young are you, I should rather say?
I'll be 92 on the 10th of July.
Unbelievable, 92. Very young, very, very young 92. So can I start, just to begin with, where were you born?
I was born in Glassman in Lithuania. It's a town north of Kovna, between Kovna and Shavel. Was born in a very wealthy family. My father and his brother had a flour and timber mill, and they were very successful. And in 1939, the Red Army occupied Lithuania. They nationalized my parents' factory. They kicked us out of our home.
This was the Russians. This is before...
The Russian, a communist government in Lithuania.
Because before it was independent for a short time.
Huh?
Before Lithuania was independent for a short time, before
Lithuania was independent from 1981 until 1941, 39. It was a good country, and 7 days before the commencement of the war, when Hitler attacked the Soviet Union, the Russians knew that there'll be trouble, and they made a list of people who are enemies of the state, not particularly anti-Semitic. It included Lithuanians, Poles, and Jewish people. And they came in the middle of the night and told us to pack. It was the 14th of June 1941. They put us in cattle tracks, and the intention was to take, because we were enemies, they considered us enemies.
This was the communists that were occupying Lithuania. Mm-hmm.
They evacuated us to northern Russia.
How old were you at this time?
I was 14.
And do you remember it very well?
Yes.
And your whole family were
My
evacuated?
two siblings, brother and sister, my parents, my uncle and his children, and we were five, and they were four people, husband, wife, and two daughters. They took us to a place called Uslokshim. This is a book written by a friend of mine who I went to kindergarten and escaped from Russia together. It's called Bedarki Sheli. And here is plotted, here is Rasen, here is Uslokshim. That's where we were for 4 years. Then we made our way to Ukraine.
You were 4 years in...
Before the war ended.
And was this deep inside Russia?
Say it again?
Where was this in Russia?
In Russia, yeah.
Wow. And where did you stay when you were in Russia? Was it in... they put you in...
in a small barrack. It's all described.
Okay, it's in a small barrack.
Yeah.
And you were with your family at the time?
Yeah. I think that if you go back
yeah, we will go, sure.
all the facts, you'll get a better picture than rushing the interview now.
Okay.
After the war, I went from Ukraine to Lodz, and then to Germany, to Munich, and on my way to Atlit in 1946, we were stopped by the British Navy, who were as bad as any other enemy of the Jewish people, and they took us to Cyprus. And here again, after the war, after I was liberated from the Russians, I was locked up in Cyprus for 8 months.
And how old were you at this time?
46, I was 19.
It must have been very difficult to have gone through the war and then to be put in
Very difficult.
in
yeah.
camps
Yeah.
where you were again
Yeah.
a prisoner in a camp
And the camp
by the
behind,
British.
behind barbed
Barbed
wire
wire.
by the liberal British Navy.
And your only crime is that you wanted to go home to Israel, which was Palestine at the time, but was the Jewish homeland. That was the crime.
So I was in Cyprus for 8 months under detention, and then my turn came to make Aliyah Bet. I came to Atlit in Haifa, and my mother's cousin came the same day, and he took me out of the camp, and I went to a place called Magdir near Ramatayim. You know it?
I know it, yeah.
And
did you have your other siblings with you at the time?
my sister.
Your sister.
My brother remained there until 1992
Where he remained.
in Uslokshim.
He didn't join you when you went down to Ukraine.
No.
And did you keep in contact with your brother through the years?
Not until 1992.
Wow.
My brother lives there by himself with no family. He married an Eskimo woman, produced 11 children.
Wow.
Didn't have anything better to do. And in 1992, when Brezhnev took over the Russian, became the head of Russia.
Gorbachev. It was Gorbachev. Gorbachev
Yeah.
was the one that
Yeah,
became more
Gorbachev.
liberal, and he
Yeah.
opened the gates and he allowed the immigration.
I offered my brother to make Aliyah with his family. He refused because his wife was diabetic, and there was no cure in Russia for diabetes at the time. And in '92, she passed away from diabetes, and then he contacted me, and he said, now I'm ready to make Aliyah. So I brought him with the assistance of the Stadrut. Out of his 11 children, 3 refused to come. They still live there. Other 8 came with him. They got assistance from the Sochnut. They settled
It's a
in
Jewish agency.
Ashkelon,
Wow.
and they are now good Israelis, a total of 65 good Jewish people.
Amazing.
The only complaint I have is they are not Megayah,
They
and
didn't
they
convert.
have difficulty in getting married in Israel.
And are they interested in converting?
Yes,
They are.
but they're not allowed to. They are accepted in the army. They study in the university and the Technion. But when it comes to get married,
It's very difficult.
they got to go to Cyprus or to the Czech Republic.
And Mordechai, can I ask, how was the meeting with your brother? It must have been extremely emotional.
It was very tragic. I came to Ashkelon. My sister lived in Ashkelon, and I was there for 2 days, and I couldn't handle it. I had no common language with him.
Did he?
He
didn't remember
he didn't
Yiddish.
speak Yiddish. He only spoke Russian. And
Was he an older brother or a
younger, 3 years younger than me? And after being with him for 2 days, I walked out. I came back to Johannesburg.
It must
I
have been
was,
extremely emotional, extremely difficult.
But he settled. I got pictures of his family. He passed away now. I went to visit to celebrate my 90th in Israel, and I met with my sister and your siblings and my brother's children. There are 65 of them now, good Israelis.
Yeah.
They kept on asking me, why didn't our father do what you did?
Why didn't he go?
Why didn't he
escape?
run away
Why
like
didn't he
I
run
did?
away?
And I couldn't answer him because I was the eldest. He was 3 years younger than me, and my sister was 6 years younger than me. I kidnapped my sister from Siberia, from Russia.
Was this part of Siberia that you were?
Europe. It's the north of Russia.
North of Russia.
North of Russia. It's west of the Ural Mountains. Does it come out in the
Yes, that must have been a very difficult journey that you made. I mean, you were so young at the time, and
Well, I walked for days in the deep snow.
and your parents,
without
were your
food.
parents, did they give permission for you to go, or?
Now, my parents passed away, both of them at the same time, from hunger. And I wasn't at home, and I was in another camp, and my intuition told me to go home. When I came home, It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was already semi-dark. My parents were lying on the bank dead, and my sister was lying in between them crying. And then I had to, with the help of my brother, I had to dig the grave. The ground is very frozen. They give you no instruments. Eventually I buried them in a shallow grave. Couldn't make it very deep.
And you were, how old were you at this time? You were very young.
I was 18 and a half.
Wow.
I ran away to the town, Syktyvkar, and there what happened is at the same time the Germans conquered Stalingrad. You know Stalin?
Yes, yes.
And the next thing they were going to attack Moscow in 1942.
I think in those days it was called Leningrad. There was the...
Now, Leningrad was far away.
It was far away.
Stalingrad was east south of Moscow, and there were Polish generals in Paris. It was the head of them was Colonel Anders, and Anders approached Churchill and he said, I can mobilize ex-Polish soldiers and we are happy to be recruited and help Stalin fight off Hitler. Churchill contacted Stalin and Stalin had no choice, so he agreed.
Sure.
And after he agreed, they said that they're prepared to help, but they put a condition that all Polish citizens who were exiled to, like us, must be liberated. Stalin had no choice, and he agreed. And then they arranged for Polish citizens to travel back to Poland. Now, what happened in Lithuania, similar to what happened in South Africa, the upper class, there was a lot of land was changed hands between Lithuania and Poland, like Vilna.
Yeah.
Belonged to Poland and couple of years later belonged to Lithuania. So the upper class in Lithuania, the landowners and the educated people, the Polish-speaking people.
Okay.
And the laborers, they were like Afrikaners in Germany.
Yeah, with Lithuania.
And I ran away from Uslokshim to Syktyvkar, that 4 of us, my Jewish friend Yitzhak Ziv, who I showed you the book.
Your
and
sister?
The other 2 were Polish-speaking Lithuanians.
And your sister was with you as well?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
When we came to the town Syktyvkar, as it happened, there's been this whole peacekeeping procedure was in place. So there was opened a Polish consulate in Syktyvkar. Now, as I told you, the two non-Jewish friends I ran away with, the one family name was Pilsudski. His uncle was a very popular president of Poland before the war.
Wow.
And his father was a cousin of the ex-Polish president. So when he came to the consulate in Syktyvkar and he presented himself as Artur Pilsudski, all the doors of the consulate opened up for him. So we said, now what about me and Yitzhak? We can't declare ourselves as Polish. So they came up with an idea. It's also, there was a lot of land which changed hands, like Vilna and other parts of Poland. From time to time it was belonged to Lithuania, and other times in history it belonged to Poland. So they came up with an idea, and the Jewish people in Poland speak with a different accent than the Litvaks. So we spoke like Litvaks. So they advised us to say that we come from a town called Grodno. Grodno was one of the territories which the Jewish people spoke with a Litvak accent. So we went there, we learned a bit of geography of Grodno. We pointed out where we were born and what street, fictitious. And the four of us became the celebrities in the consulate.
Wow.
They appointed us, the Polish people were like going out of a concentration camp. They were very unnourished.
From starvation,
from starvation. So they had to fatten them up. So they had, all of a sudden they had a lot of food in the consulate and warm clothing. And we, the four of us, became in charge of the consulate.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we distributed some of it, but we also gambled a lot.
Yeah, that means
we sold it on the black market.
Yeah.
So I went to the river, and there was a motorboat, and I said to the man, I'll pay you a lot of money, go and bring my sister and brother. So he went, and he came back empty-handed. My aunt didn't believe my story. She didn't want to risk their life to let them go. He came back, so I said to him, I'll double your fee. You go and kidnap them.
Wow.
So he went back.
And this was a non-Jewish...
yeah, Russian.
Russian.
You can bribe them.
Yeah.
He went back. The tragedy is that my brother was old enough to refuse. He had his own mind. My sister was, at the time, 8 years old. So he kidnapped her, but against the will.
And this is still during the war? The war was still raging?
Yeah, it was in 44.
44.
Or in 43. And he brought her to Syktyvkar, and as she arrived, the Russians were too ashamed to send us back to Europe the way we looked. We were like starvation.
Yeah.
So they decided to send us to Ukraine to fatten, to create a bit of a better appearance. So as my sister arrived, I got instructions to move from Syktyvkar to Ukraine. And I didn't know what to do with my sister. So I was advised to put her into a Polish orphanage. She couldn't speak Polish. She was 8 years old, but she had enough sense not to show her identity, so she stopped speaking altogether.
Wow.
And during the same time, the war ended, was the 9th of May 1945, and we had a good enough appearance to go back to the West. So they put us again on trains, and we made our way to Lodz in Poland. And when we arrived in Lodz, there were shlichim from Israel. There was an organization called Bricha. Don't know if you heard. Bricha Livroch.
To flee.
To run.
To run, to flee.
And they helped all the refugees to make way to Israel.
Can I just ask you, Mordechai, when you went to Lodz, did you meet any Poles? Because they say when the Jews came back to Poland, it was very bad.
No way to tell you. We went to Lodz, we arrived in the station, and people from Bricha and shlichim from Palestine were waiting for us. They knew we were coming.
This was from the Jewish agency?
Jewish agency, yeah. And they said to us, and there were various, there was Mapai and Ardut Avoda.
Different organizations. Recruiting.
Recruiters. Before the war, I was in Beitar.
Beitar's more revisionist.
I was. I didn't know. I liked the uniform.
And your ideology, was it more because...
Well, I was too young. I was impressed with the uniform. I was, when I was 10 years old, my parents allowed me to go to Kovna to listen to Zev Jabotinsky.
He was the founder of the Beitar. And you remember listening to Jabotinsky in Kovna?
Even remember what he talked about. Was the beginning of my Zionist upbringing.
You see, he was a very dynamic, not only dynamic, but he was sincere.
Well, Begin was his understudy.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when I arrived in Lodz, I said I belong to Beitar. And I met Landsman, who was from Rasen, was 3 years older than me. And he said, don't worry, Beitar, anything, come with me. He was Ardut Avoda. And they had a building, and we went there, and I became Ardut Avoda. I didn't know any different. Then his name was Apke Levius. I said, I got to find my sister. So we made a bit of research, and we found her in an orphanage, Catholic orphanage in Lodz.
In Lodz?
Yeah. But they wouldn't part with her. They wanted to convert them.
Yeah.
So she was sleeping on the 2nd floor in the building, and 4 of us went and we organized a ladder, and we climbed up to the second floor, and we kidnapped her for the second time.
Wow. And where she was staying at the monastery or the convent,
Convent,
they wouldn't part with
They wouldn't part with her.
even though you said, I'm her brother and I'm her family.
I can't remember. I didn't approach them. All what I know is that they wouldn't let her go.
Wow.
So we arranged for her to come up to the window on the second floor, and we put up a ladder, and we kidnapped her again. From the monastery.
Unbelievable.
So and thereafter there was shlichim, and they helped us, and we made our way from Lodz to Munich via Austrian Alps to Genoa, and there was
No.
there was Aliyah Bet, and Tova, my sister, went before me.
That's right.
And I waited for my turn, and I got on a ship called She'ar Yashuv. It's 800 Olim. And we made our way to Haifa
This was in 47,
in 46.
46,
We made our way to
before
Haifa.
the independence.
Yeah, before. And about a day sailing before Haifa, the British Navy was waiting for us. They took us off the She'ar Yashuv onto war ships, and they took us to Cyprus, and we ended up back behind barbed wire.
Wow. And your sister managed to enter...
No, my sister was also in Cyprus.
Also in Cyprus.
Yeah, I knew at the time a bit of Hebrew, so there was a quota to go back to Atlit. And when my turn came, they asked me to remain and teach Hebrew in Cyprus. So I stayed for another 3 months, and Tova, my sister, went before me, and she ended up in a kibbutz called Ashdod Yaakov, near the Kinneret. And later on, my turn came in 46. I went to Atlit, and by then I made contact with my mother's family. He lived in Magdil, near Ramatayim. And he had a Pardes, neighboring...
Pardes is a field.
Sharon. Pardes, orange.
Orange groves. Orange groves.
Near Eric Sharon.
Oh, really? Wow. What a small world. Wow.
And treated me like an adopted son. He was a poor man. He was a cashier in Bank Hapoalim.
Wow. This was your mishpacha from...
my mother's cousin.
Your mother's side.
He gave up his room for me.
Wow.
I got pictures of his family here to show you. And I walked around in Magdil. I was the only young man in the village. And I was ashamed to be there.
Why?
And after 10, because everybody was in Haganah.
Oh, and
all
you
the
were...
young people.
Oh, okay.
So...
Haganah was it was before the establishment of the state.
46.
In 46, Haganah was the
Yeah.
Jewish Defense Force.
So I volunteered after 10 days being in Israel. I volunteered to Haganah. And I served in משטרת רעננה כפר סבא. זה משטרה זה?
It's the
צומת כפר סבא רעננה.
and Renana it was already established.
Yeah. And we used to go on fights to Kfar Saba Aravit and to Kalkilia.
Wow.
And one night I went out and I was shot in the knee. I was injured. And the day before I was injured, I was reading in the Ma'ariv that there was a Jewish doctor in Tzfat who was a turncoat. And when they used to bring in injured people from the Haganah, he used to amputate instead of healing them. So I was reading this article, and the following night I got injured. And they rushed me to Beilinson, to Petach Tikva Hospital. And I was waiting there in the corridors of a lot of injured people. And when my turn came to take into the operating theater, they wanted to give me anesthetic to operate my knee. And I remembered
that story.
What this doctor did in Tzfat. So I refused to take anesthetic.
Wow.
And eventually they gave in and they gave me a local anesthetic and they took out the bullet of my knee.
And it must have been very painful. Do you still remember?
Wasn't
things like that you don't forget. One never forgets.
And then I was hospitalized and they picked me up in Rehovot Yarkon in a 5-star hotel to recuperate. And after I recuperated, my unit was all wiped out.
Wow.
So they didn't know where to send me. So they sent me to Givati, Khativat Givati, in the Negev. And this is where I became Mefaked Machlaka.
Mefaked is officer.
Yeah. And where I finished my military career after 4 years.
So you fought in the War of Independence?
Yes.
Before the war and during the war?
Before the war. And on the 15th of May 1948, I was chosen to march to celebrate the war independence in Tel Aviv. I got a picture of it.
So a real hero we have in front. Yeah. Mordechai, we have an amazing hero, a mamash gibor, a real hero.
So,
unbelievable.
After 4 years, I was liberated from the army, and as a gratuity, they offered me to study in university for free. So I chose to go to the Haifa Technion. So I went to the Technion, and they said, A4 to dat Bagrut.
Yeah.
So I said, I never went to school. So they said, why do you come here? You can't study. So I came home, and there were my cousins from Johannesburg. I lived with them by then. They were both engineers.
Were they living in Israel at the time?
They made Aliyah from Johannesburg. Tzvi.
And their surnames?
Yeah. The surname is Tzvi.
Tzvi. And they were also Litvaks. They were their family originally
my
came from...
uncle's children. Mm-hmm. And my cousin Zev, I was very upset. I couldn't study. So he says, don't worry, we'll sort you out. So he says, go back to Haifa, to the Technion, and ask them if you pass mathematics, will they accept you?
Sure.
Algebra and geometry.
Yeah.
So I went back, they said, well, we'll see. So I locked myself up in Ramat Gan with my cousin, Wolf Zwi, and he was teaching me algebra and geometry.
I mean, you had never been to, you had to flee, you went through the war, you had never
I
had the
didn't know
opportunity,
anything.
you weren't given the opportunity to learn maths.
I was a good student. And when I was ready, I went back to the Technion, and I said, I'm prepared to write exams, only algebra and geometry. I have now to that Bagrut, and they accepted
That's a matriculation certificate.
So I studied Medidot, Moded, that was a Moded, civil engineering.
Engineering, yeah.
Was a section in Cholon, and I qualified. And then I got a job in Iriyat Tel Aviv to build the roads.
Wow.
And at the same time, my cousin, Professor Sol Zwi, he was getting married in Johannesburg. And my uncle invited me to come to the wedding, to be a Perlov at the wedding.
Sure.
So I flew to Johannesburg.
This was in the early 50s?
In 53.
53.
And he lived in Riviera Mansions, over the road from Oxford Shul. And he said to me, I got crystal confectionery, it's a big business. I'll teach you.
I think Crystals was in Hillbrow.
In Domfontein.
In Domfontein.
It was all over,
Yeah.
branches. He said, Saul, my son, is now moving out. You can move into his bedroom. I'll teach you the bakery trade, and you be like my fourth son. He was like adopted me. I agreed, and I was there for a certain amount of time. I couldn't speak English. By then I was 26. Johannesburg girls wouldn't date me. They said I'm a greener.
A greener, yeah. Somebody who doesn't know the language and doesn't know the whole...
So I was lonely and was miserable. So one day I said to my uncle, I want to go back to Tel Aviv. And he was a very understanding man. And he said, I can't stand in your way. So I flew back to Tel Aviv. I came in 53.
Mm-hmm.
I came to the Tachana Merkazit in Tel Aviv. Nobody came to meet me. People were queuing and pushing each other to get on the buses. I walked up to Rehov Herzl in Allenby, and I checked myself into a cheap hotel. They didn't have a room, so they said, can you share a room? So I was sharing a room with 3 Arabs, and they were snoring and farting in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And I couldn't fall asleep. And I lay in my bed and I said, what the bloody hell have you done? You left a loving family and you walked out on them. And after 20 hours, I was sorry for leaving Johannesburg. So
And you didn't... How come you didn't go to your sister? That was
my sister was in a kibbutz in Ashdod Yaakov.
But you didn't want to go to the kibbutz?
Well, it's far and
It's far.
communication was bad at the time. she didn't come. She was very young.
Yeah.
She was a kid. So I went to Rehovot Yarkon, was South Africa House.
That's right. The Telfed. It was part of Telfed, the very
Yeah.
early stages of Telfed.
Yeah. And I created a telegram in half Yiddish, half Hebrew, and I sent it to my uncle, saying that I made a mistake.
Wow.
He was very understanding. He didn't say, I told you so,
Yeah.
but the reply was, after 24 hours, there was a telegram, was a travel agency, Perlov.
That's right. Felters was a very well-known travel agency.
Yeah.
They were also during the war. They did a lot of
Yeah.
work before the war,
Yeah,
during the
there
war.
was owned by, I forgot his name now. Anyway, after 24 hours there was a telegram. He says, there's a ticket for you in Perlov, but this time it's not for free.
Uh-huh.
He says, you'll have to pay me back.
Wow.
So I was in Tel Aviv maybe for 72 hours, and I flew back to Germany.
You didn't visit your sister?
No.
It must have been difficult.
Yeah, it was very depressing.
Yeah.
And I came back. He trained me in his business, and he bought up a number of bakeries. He made me managing director of one of them, Fotheringham's Bakery, and I was successful. He employed a teacher to teach me English.
Wow.
And I lived with him. And later on, after 4 or 5 years, I met a South African girl, and she agreed to marry me.
Was she of Litvak descent as well, from Lithuania? Her parents?
Maybe her grandparents.
Her grandparents.
Lived in Dornfontein. And we got 3 children, 5 grandchildren,
Wonderful.
and I made a big success in life. And my wife passed away 3 years ago, so now my 2 children are in Sydney and 1 is in London. I've been to Sydney in the last 20 years about 49 times.
Wow.
And on my way on the Queen Mary from Cape Town to Perth in 3 weeks' time.
You'll be going again? Wow.
Yeah.
So you have no children living in South Africa?
No. My nearest friend is Benji and his family.
The Silvermans. And during this time, did you often go back to Israel as well to visit your sister?
I go back. I brought my brother to Israel, as I told you
Yeah.
before.
And did your sister marry?
Sister married. She widowed twice. She lives in Kiryat Bialik. I bought her a little house.
What a special brother you are. What an amazing...
This house is still there among all the tall buildings. Last time I went to Israel is in a year and a half ago to celebrate my 90th. And I got the album.
And you've kept close contact with your sister?
I find my sister every Friday afternoon.
Wow.
I haven't missed once.
You're a very special brother. You know, your parents must be very, very proud of you, what you did and what you achieved. Mordechai, it's the most amazing story.
So there is a lot of...
do you have a picture of your sister?
Yeah.
It would be, I'm sure our viewers and everybody would be just fascinated to see. And this was on your 90th birthday you celebrated in Israel. And you still remember your Hebrew?
I speak Hebrew.
Yeah.
Hebrew is my mother language. My best, more fluent in Hebrew than English.
And in the front of the book, it's a picture of
Jerusalem.
And are those your
my son, my daughter-in-law, and my sister.
what? And your sister? Wow. And it's Yerushalayim Jerusalem in the background. Wow.
I'll show you my brother's family.
You know, I just want to mention, Mordechai, you were speaking that when you came off the boat and then you volunteered for the Palmach.
Yeah. That's my brother's children, 8 of them.
Wow.
You see the Mongolic expression.
But they're Israeli, and they serve in the army, and wow, amazing. And they're happy in Israel.
Huh?
They're happy living in Israel. They speak Hebrew.
Sure, they're happy.
Yeah.
But 3 of their brothers
remained
come.
in Russia.
They come to visit them in Ashkelon, and they go back.
So Mordechai, when you mentioned that you were embarrassed that you weren't part of the Palmach, these stories, and it's so sad, and I've seen it, where you go to the cemeteries and you look at the cemeteries and you see at the grave, by the gravestones, where somebody landed, had come from the Shoah, from the Holocaust, and they just landed, and then they had to fight to defend the country. Yeah. And 2 or 3 days later they fell, they died.
Correct.
So what you went through is unbelievable. It is something...
And for 60 years, that's my brother's matzava in Ashkelon.
In Ashkelon.
And that's his son.
Wow.
You can see
so you can see,
and my son.
And they close the first cousins?
No.
It's coming from different cultures, different...
But my sister is like their matriarch.
Yeah.
And whatever problems they have,
go to your sister.
They go to my sister, and she helps them.
And your sister has a family?
She double widow. She lost her first husband in 87, and she remarried unsuccessfully.
But did she have children?
She got a son who is in IT, and the daughter is a banker in Israel. They live in Zichron Yaakov, quite well
Which is quite near to Haifa. It's on the way to Haifa.
And she's got now great-grandchildren.
Thank God.
Yeah. I spoke to her on Friday. Speak to her every Friday. And
Mordechai, can I just ask, the reason why you didn't tell your children it's a very difficult and a tragic and very hard your upbringing and what you went through. Did you feel you didn't want to burden your children with your experiences and your hardships that you went through?
I'll answer to you. After I finished the army, my 2 cousins immigrated from Johannesburg to Ramat Gan. They were both married. My uncle bought us a larger flat in Ramat Gan in Sderot HaYeled, and we lived like a family. There were 4 of them, 2 brothers and their wives, and myself, 5. We lived like brother and sister. And the one, my cousin Rose Tzvi.
Rose Tzvi, she helped you write the book.
She helped me write the book. Eventually, she was very liberal She was Black Sash in Johannesburg. And when we used to talk politics in Ramat Gan, they used to try and tell them what happened to me, that they wouldn't believe me. They said I'm talking bull.
Oy, oy, oy. Why
So-
wouldn't they believe you?
No, they were Shomer HaTzair and worse than Shomer HaTzair.
It's very,
Rose was
very-
Black Sash.
very left wing.
She was arrested here in Johannesburg. So in order not to fight and have a shalom bayit, we came to an agreement not to talk politics. And after this, I shut up. I never talked about my past. Until 5 years ago, Rose went to a lecture in Sydney at the Jewish Museum.
Is Rose living in Sydney?
Well, she's on her way. She's in hospice now, going to die.
Oh, shame. But where was she living? She was living in Sydney?
In Sydney, she is in Sydney.
Okay.
She went to a lecture at the Jewish Museum. There was an American philosopher or doctor, and the theme of the lecture was that in the 20th century there were two evils, communism and Nazism. And somehow, first time he convinced her at the age of 80
Wow.
that communism is as bad or worse than Nazism. She walked out of the museum. I was living in Bondi Junction. She phoned me and she said, now I'm sorry and I'm ready to record your story.
Wow.
So, at the same day, she felt pain and she was diagnosed with uterus cancer.
Oy. The same day?
Huh?
This was the
Same
same
day she
Unbelievable.
got pain. So, she went to her husband and she said, I don't know for how long I live, but before they got a holiday home out of Sydney, she said, I'm going to the holiday home. I'll lock myself up. You're not coming with me because I don't want to be disturbed. And she wrote my story.
And you were in Sydney at the time?
Yeah.
You could relate your story to
Yeah,
her?
she got better and she interviewed me. She interviewed my sister. She went to Israel to interview my sister. She interviewed Yitzhak and she wrote the story. And after that, I started talking about it, and
How did your children react when they...
they, even now, they keep a distance. When I published this article,
This was in the
yeah, in
it's a
October,
South African
my
Jewish
son
publication,
said,
Jewish Life.
don't, they, I don't know why. They know the story, but we don't talk about it.
It's a very difficult burden to carry.
Yeah.
It's
But 3 years ago, I gave a talk at Limud in Johannesburg.
and it was very well received,
Was
I'm
very
sure.
well received. And I do it in a way, I'm interviewed by a young man, he's 34, Michael Kransdorf. He's the most educated young man in Johannesburg. He's got a PhD of Harvard.
Wow.
and he interviews me
On the stage,
and
in front of
stage, and we got slides. We show a lot of
the pictures.
pictures which I retain, and it's very successful, and now I can't stop. I want to talk
Mordechai,
more and more.
can I just mention, when I went to Lithuania, and we went on a heritage tour, and my brother had been 20 years before, and he met the last surviving Jewish woman who was in Mariupol. That's where my grandmother came from. And she cried because she had very little connection with Yiddishkeit, and she met my brother, and we sent her a book on Mariupol. But what I found very interesting on our tour is that, Baruch Hashem, thank God, we grew up knowing a lot about the shtetl where my grandmother came from. We knew about Mariupol, was part of us. She was very proud to say where they came from. There were many people on our tour that had no idea. They didn't know which shtetl the unanimous, what we found, which was so sad to hear, is people said, if only our parents would have told us, or our grandparents would have told us their story or where they came from. We feel deprived. We feel we were robbed of part of our heritage, where we came from. We'd also like to know which shtetl we came from, to look around, to see, wow, our grandparents walked these streets, and it's so important what you're doing, relating the story. It's very important, not only for your own family, but for everybody. And today, when you have so many Holocaust deniers, and you have so many people that they want to like take history and falsify history, you are a living testament to what happened, and so courageous. I mean, I'm in the presence of a real hero, somebody who had gone through so much in your life, and you volunteered for the Palmach. You could have gone into any country in Europe and just retired, or just had an easy life. But you chose to come to Israel. You chose to come to a place where there was a lot of conflict, where, as I had mentioned, a lot of people did come in. Unfortunately, they died in the war. I mean, you were shot in your leg. You could have then said, well, I'm out of here. So you are really a true Gibor, a true hero, and I cannot thank you enough for giving me your valuable time, for letting us and telling your story that so many people can now hear and appreciate and admire your courage, your devotion to your brother and your sister. All I can say is, I know, well, Hashem knows, but that your parents must be very, very proud of you for what you've done and what you've gone through. And you are an example for all of us to emulate, really. It's been an honor and a privilege to meet you and to hear your story. And we just wish you mazel and bracha and good health, and you should continue telling your story. It's very, very important that people hear what you went through and how you overcame so many terrible, terrible obstacles. A young child to bury their own parents. I mean, that could scar somebody for life. Those memories must haunt you, like you wrote in your book, From Hell. I mean, what you've gone through is unbelievable. One should never know to have gone through what you've gone through, and yet you're so positive. You have a very positive outlook on life and a zest for life. Wow. It really is unbelievable, and I'm so blessed that I've met you. I really am, and I really appreciate it, and I really want to thank you.
Thanks for listening to me.
Well, please God, many people will listen to this video and watch this video and will admire what you've done. A real hero of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, and somebody that we really can emulate. Thank you so very much.
Well, that's very condensed what we discussed now. It's got more detail, if you...
Just for our listeners out there, and the people that will be watching this video, can people manage to get your book? Can they buy your book?
There is a bit of a problem. The book, we made 2 prints. published by the Sydney Museum, and it's sold out.
Can they do another publishing or?
Rose has got the publishing rights. My intention is to print a couple of thousand copies at my own cost, and to give a copy to each graduate of King David and Yeshiva College.
Those are the Jewish day schools
and
here
in
in South
Sydney,
Africa.
where my grandchildren graduated. I made contact with the printer. It will not cost a lot of money, and I'm in process of doing it.
Wonderful. That's really is very special. Very special. Well, I really want to thank you again, and I know that the family, the Tzvi family, I was in the same class as Paul Tzvi. His father was a very prominent doctor, so I'm sure it's the same family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Saul was a professor at
Yeah.
and he was specializing on pneumoconiosis.
yeah. So it's a small world, and we just wish you all of Hashem's blessings. You must admire Vesrim till 120 plus VAT. So you should just be gesund, you should be healthy, and have nachas from your children and your grandchildren and everybody that you meet. And we just wish you all the very, very best.
Well, my mission in life now is to tell the world that communism, Stalin and Putin are bigger murderers than the Nazis, because Hitler is dead. Angela Merkel is a friend of Israel.
Yeah, she's a friend.
I sent her a copy of my book.
Wow.
That's the German ambassador.
Oh, you gave it to the German ambassador?
Yeah.
And did you get a reply from...
No, not yet.
Not yet, but it will come.
What I want to convey is, a week ago, Putin, the murderer from Turkey, and Bashir Assad from Syria, they're all sitting together criticizing Israel.
It's incredible. If you think about it, as we're speaking now, there's murdering going on. Arabs are being killed in Syria. Children are being killed in Syria, but the world...
In Iran, today, uprising,
Yeah.
and it's all Putin's political maneuvering. He is worse. He's the biggest murderer in the world.
Hitler was...
That's my mission.
I know, but Hitler was...
Huh?
Hitler was evil. There's no words to describe how evil
Who?
Hitler was and what the Nazis did.
Well,
And
I don't want to debate it.
but you're right. The world stays silent when...
Is this still on?
Yeah.
What I want to show you is that my family tree, and have a look what my brother contributed to Israel.
That's amazing.
The blue one.
It's the blue. Wow, this is very special.
So the point I want to make is, you say I made a big contribution to Israel.
Tremendous.
Tova, my sister, lived there for many years and brought up a family. She's a good Israeli. But I think in the short time, my brother came to Israel. That's what he brought.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hmm?
But you were the one that helped your brother come to Israel as well.
Yes.
You financed him to come.
Partly, Histadrut helped me.
It's wonderful. You can be so proud. Mordechai, you've achieved a fortune, and you've done so many mitzvot, so many good deeds, and you should just be blessed, really.
Maybe that's why I'm here. All my peers are gone.
Well, you thank God you look well, and you should, and you are so articulate. You speak so beautifully from the heart, and wow, you must just continue and just be well and have all of Hashem's blessings. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, you got a recording of.
Thank you, and all the best for 2018. And you just with your family, you're going to Sydney. You must only have smachot, only good, besorotavot, good tidings, good things, and your life should be filled with joy and nachas, and only good of Hashem's blessings. Thank you very much.
Stroke of luck that Benji bumped into you
It's
last
Min
night.
Hashamayim. It's actually
Huh?
it's not a coincidence. It was meant to be, and it's Min Hashamayim. And thank you very, very much.